This podcast is on the lymphatic system. I gave you a copy of the notes in class on a beige piece of paper, front and back, just one page right there. I also have pictures of the lymphatic system, all the lymph nodes, and this is on the back of the respiratory official color picture sheet. So there are the lymph node guys right there, and then a little diagram of how the lymph gets returned into the cardiovascular system, correct, okay? And then the last sheet that's been posted for the lymphatic system, it just compares the different antibodies or immunoglobulins, which are the same thing, and there are 5 of them, immunoglobulin G, A, M, E, and D, okay? And then it tells you, well, if you ever have a blood test and it comes back with low antibodies, what that would mean for the big 5 right there. And if it's high, then it tells you what the problem is. So this chart is extremely hard to read, but basically you can go to this website and then it's much easier to read than to print off in a legible manner. So then I also put a few extra things down here about some of the antibodies, and I'll talk about them a little bit later in the podcast, okay? So for right now, we're gonna go over some of the notes right here in this podcast. And so we're gonna start out with over here. First of all, the lymphatic system is sometimes called the immune system, all right? Sometimes it's broken down into 2 separate systems based on what it does, all right? And so lymphatic refers to returning leaked plasma, which is called lymph, okay? So if the plasma doesn't go back into a cardiovascular capillary, then it's out around the tissues, and so basically that is then called lymph, and then it's got to get returned back to the cardiovascular system. And so that is the lymphatic system. That's where we get the name for that system from, is all based on returning leaked plasma back to the CV system. And then there's another component, the second big function of the lymphatic system, or the number 1 function of the immune system. The immune system refers to the process and functions of the antibodies. How we make antibodies, what are their names, where do they go, and what do they do exactly. So it's a lot like the process of learning hormones. All right, so now we are going to just lump all of the antibody and immunoglobulins in with the lymphatic system. So in our book, we just have a lymphatic system that returns leaked plasma, and then it also has the immune function, right, of making antibodies or immunoglobulins. All right, so on the board here, I have the primary organs, okay, the primary organs, and the primary organs are basically called lymph nodes, right? And so we have 2 kinds of lymph nodes. We have capsulated up here, the capsulated, and these we have the most of, and then we have non-encapsulated over there in blue. And so if it has a capsule, all right, the capsule has to be obvious. It has to go all the way around, making the outer boundary on the lymph node, and so those are capsulated lymph nodes. So these on this list right here are the capsulated. The spleen is the largest lymph node in the human body. The largest, and it is on the right side in the abdomen, ABD. And we saw it when we dissected cats. It was sort of attached to the greater omentum and the lesser omentum. So it looked like a dark tongue-looking structure, and so that is the largest lymph node in the human body. Then we have the thymus gland. We did not see that in our dissection of the cat. And so the thymus gland would be like the 2nd largest lymph node that we have, okay? 2nd largest. But the problem with this lymph node is it disappears or atrophies by age 13. And so at age 13, basically what's going to happen is it atrophies. It atrophies. It is done making antibodies for the rest of its life because it's going to shrink and become scar tissue, all right? And where do you find the thymus gland? The thymus gland is actually going to sit, if this is the heart, and then we've got the sac around the heart. This is the pericardial sac right here, right there. And so the thymus gland is actually going to sit on top of the pericardial sac, right? And so it looks like this big leafy thing, like that. And so it will be sitting on top of the sac. So it is superior to the pericardial sac, or another name for pericardial sac would be parietal, right? Pericardium. All right, that membrane. So that is the thymus gland. And it's the only lymph node that shrinks and goes away in everyone, right? All right, now, we also have lymph nodes that are called landmark lymph nodes. Why? Because there are clusters of them, groups of them, in specific areas of the body, all right? So most of your lymph nodes, the smaller ones, they're gonna be found basically underneath the skin, sitting on top of organs like skeletal muscles or specific organs. And then we're gonna name them based on where the group of them are. So these are typically called landmark ones, because when I say axillary to you, axillary lymph nodes, you know where that is, in the armpit. Cervical are in the neck, okay, and the lower part of the chin area. And then we have mammary around the mam glands. Around the nipple area, we have inguinals, which are in the crease of the leg, and thoracic, and we have abdominals. And these basically can be scattered on top of certain organs randomly, right? Now, one thing about the inguinals that I need to make sure you understand is you should never see these lymph nodes. Actually, you really don't see any of the lymph nodes, the smaller lymph nodes, unless they're swelling. The cervicals are the best ones that swell when you have infections and you're actively fighting a disease. But if you ever see your inguinal lymph nodes, then you need to go see the doctor immediately, because that indicates a very high probability of having ovarian or testicular cancer. So you should never see these. These are in that crease. Now, if you're a bodybuilder, then that's a little bit different. You have zero body fat, and so then they might pop out and you might see them. They look like marbles, and so small marbles. But anyway, other than that, no, you should never see them in any stage of life, right? All right, and then the next group we have are membrane-related lymph nodes, okay? They are named because they're in the membranes. And so mesenteric, which is what, the small intestine, membrane, we have omental, the greater and lesser omentum. We've got a bunch of small ones in there. And we have peritoneal against the body wall, right? Sitting on top of your muscles. And so those are clustered. And then the last cluster or group are your famous tonsils, okay? Your tonsil lymph nodes. And we have 3 sets, right and left. And so we have 2 pharyngeal. Sometimes these are nicknamed adenoids, right? And then palatine, right and left, and we have the linguals back by the root of the tongue, and so those are going to be the linguals, okay? So anyway, those would be our tonsils. Now, the only other set of lymph nodes there are the other ones called non-encapsulated. They do not have a capsule around them. And you already know these because we studied these in the digestive system. They are in the wall of the ileum, last part of the small intestine. They're found in the tunica mucosa and submucosa. And basically, they are just masses of lymphocytes that are going to eat basically the bacteria and viruses. They're going to destroy them when it comes through with the protein food items being absorbed back there. And so Peyer's patches are the only non-encapsulated lymph nodes. So all lymph nodes are solid organs, definitely. They are all solid organs, and basically they have to have the big P and the big S. So what's the parenchyma? the specific tissue that does the basically phagocytosis of all the bacteria and viruses, well, it's lymphocytes. Lymphocytes are white blood cells, and they're going to destroy the bacteria and viruses. And then what's stroma? What's going to support them, feed them, and control them? Reticular connective tissue, fenestrated, right? Leaky capillaries in there. And remember, reticular CT has 3 fibers in it, collagen, elastic, and reticular, and that makes it very strong and stretchy, so that when your lymph nodes do swell, when they're actively fighting diseases, and it gives them good support, right? So those are our primary organs. Some more primary organs in the lymphatic system are the lymphatic veins and capillaries. There are no arteries, just veins and capillaries. And the veins in the lymphatic system are exactly like the veins in the cardiovascular, all right? We have sizes, large, medium, small, extra small, and we have fenestrated capillaries, right? All their capillaries in the lymphatic system are fenestrated so that they can collect lymph faster to get it returned to the cardio system. And so the sizes, again, are based on the number of muscle layers in the tunica media, right? Then the tunics are named exactly the same as cardiovascular. We have tunica externa, we have tunica media, we have tunica interna, and then the specific layer of simple squamous in the inside next to the lumen, which is the lamina epithelialis, is called endothelium, just like the cardiovascular system, right? So everything's the same there. And even the veins, all the sizes of veins, they all have valves, okay? They're all gonna have valves to prevent backflow. And so again, they're made from the tunica interna layer that makes every valve in all of the veins in cardiovascular and in lymphatic. All right, so all of these veins and capillaries are meant to, capillaries are gonna collect the lymph, and then the veins are gonna take it back and send it into one of these ducts right here, okay? And so right here, we have the thoracic duct first. And so it is, all of these ducts are on your picture, but they're not really that great right here. So we might wanna look at something in the lab, a couple of, a model and a picture in the lab. All right, to see some of these structures. But anyway, here, the thoracic duct, it's gonna collect lymph essentially from your left thorax area, okay, left thorax area, left arm, the entire abdomen, all right, and both legs, right? And so once they collect all the leaked plasma, called lymph, basically then it's gonna go and take it via the lymphatic veins. Basically, it's gonna go and take it up into the left subclavian vein, right up here in the shoulder of the cardiovascular system. So it will take it back up there, and then it will become part of the cardiovascular system again, known as plasma, right? And then the cisternae chyli also collects from all the digestive organs, essentially in the thorax and abdomen, and then it moves all the lymph basically into the thoracic duct. So it's going to collect from the digestive organs and some leaked plasma from the thorax and abdomen, and then it's going to turn around and take it up into the thoracic duct. And so basically, once it's in the thoracic duct is then going to dump it into the left subclavian vein right there. Now, what do we do with all the right-sided lymph that we collect? Well, there's the lymphatic duct on the right side that's going to come up and dump into the right subclavian vein. And so this duct is called the lymphatic duct, okay? And so it collects lymph from the right arm, that includes hand, the right thorax area, and then it's going to dump it right into here. So this is not a major duct, but it does take care of the small part right here and into the arms and into the arm and to the hand, right? So these two are the major collectors of lymph for the lymphatic system to make it return to basically the left side right there, left subclavian artery. This is the model I was talking about with all the lymph nodes on it right here. And then also this is the lymphatic poster that will give you a better picture of the thoracic duct, the cisternae chyli, and the lymphatic duct up there. So you might want to come and look at this. Also, I'm going to just shoot a picture at the end of this podcast of these two things that you can go right to and then look at them a lot better than having it embedded in the podcast. The last primary organ, in quotes, is really a tissue. Why? Because the definition of lymph is it's leaked plasma from a cardiovascular capillary. And you know the plasma is the liquid matrix of blood CT. So we really can't call this an organ, it's really a tissue because it's a liquid, right? And lymph has a pH of 9, basically, because it's not inside a capillary. And so, you know that blood has a pH of 7.2 plus or minus 2. Now, besides having plasma, leaked CV plasma, lymph is also made out of cells. It has some cells floating in it, okay? And we have 4 specific cells that can be found in your lymph. And so the first 2 are the most important, right up here. The first one is called a T cell, and it's made in your thymus gland until age 13, or whenever it atrophies, right around age 13. And so the thymus gland is going to make an antibody called the T antibody for the thymus gland. Get it? It's named for where it's made. And so that antibody will be placed on the cell membrane. And you can't see that. You have to have an electron microscope to see the antibodies. But that T cell, those antibodies, are pieces of protein that will specifically attack bacteria and viruses, right? Depending upon how they're made, right? And so then we have another antibody made on lymphocytes, and these lymphocytes are called beta cells or B cells. And so they're made in, these lymphocytes made in the bone marrow, and they make a B antibody, and they place it on the cell membrane to destroy bacteria and viruses, right? So it's a form of immunity/defense, right? All right, then we have 2 more cells right here, and these are not lymphocytes, okay? And so plasma cells are essentially Lucy T cells or fibroblasts in your bone marrow that can turn into T or beta lymphocytes. And this is where you get your long-term immunity from right here, these famous plasma cells. Because once you lose your thymus, then the bone marrow takes over and makes these T antibodies, right? But they also make their own antibody called the B antibody and put it only on the lymphocytes, right? So right there, so the plasma cells, these are going to differentiate into lymphocytes with the T or the B antibody to fight diseases, right there. And then the last cell that's in your lymph a lot of times is actually a cardiovascular cell, and it's called a basophil, a mast cell. And when we saw those to identify blood cells, the mast cell or the basophil is just a solid, granular looking, purple, small, white blood cell right there. And so that's what it actually looks like right there. And so it has granules in it that are basophilic. And what's in those granules? Well, there's actually 2 things. There's heparin, but that's not a lymphatic function. And so it has, this cell produces histamine also. And histamine is part of the lymphatic immune system because histamine starts allergic reactions so that you can get rid of any invading foreign material like a foreign antigen or some sort of pathogen or whatever. And so histamine essentially encourages what? Mucus production. Your nose starts to run, it thins, it aggravates your goblet cells, it dilates blood vessels, and so when the plasma comes out, it makes you itch. and it turns the skin redder. Also, sneezing occurs with high levels of histamine, and so the body's trying to get rid of that invading organism or whatever it is. And then tears happen, right? And so basically, if you get things in your eyes, histamine is going to also help it from these wonderful mast cells to try to get rid of it associated with your eyes by producing more tears. So that's an allergic reaction. So those are the 4 cells that are predominantly found in lymph, right? Okay. And so then the last thing, just to remind you, what do lymphocytes look like? We looked at them on a slide, and you can ID them. They stain. The nucleus is big and dark purple, and they got a quarter moon of basophilic cytoplasm, right? Basophilic cytoplasm, just a little sliver of it on the very edge, right? A light purple. All right, now we do have a few secondary or accessory organs with the system that are going to support all our primaries. And so what would they be? Well, they'd be cardiovascular blood vessels that actually do the leaking of the plasma so that you can create lymph, right? And then we have skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles, they're going to push against the lymphatic vein wall, just like cardiovascular blood vessels, to help move the lymph, right? So it's sort of a secondary type of function. And then we have right and left subclavian veins, which are in the cardiovascular system right up here. And that's where all the lymph is returned to. And so you want to return that lymph into your BVs so that that will help maintain blood pressure and blood volume, okay? So that's going to help basically blood pressure and blood volume right there by returning all your lymph, correct. All right, and then the appendix. The appendix, part of the digestive system, or attached to the digestive system. The actual first part of the large intestine, called the cecum, with the ascending. Right off the cecum is a finger-like structure, and so it's a small tubular organ, and it's called the appendix, and it had no digestive function except for to get clogged with food or waste material. But in the lymphatic system or immune system, they have found that it does produce antibodies. Only one, and the one that it basically produces is called IgD, right? And so IgD, and so that's the one that's been discovered so far. So those are all your organs and one primary tissue associated with the lymphatic immune system for right now. Now we're going to go over the functions for the lymphatic system. So the number 1 job is to return leak plasma back to the CV system. Number 2, lymph nodes clean the blood of bacteria and viruses. 3, they produce antibodies or Igs. Remember, same concept, same thing. All your antibodies / immunoglobulins are made of protein, and there are 5 of them, 5 specific ones, GAMED. And those antibodies destroy invading antigens and pathogens, all right? So anything that's an antigen is something that's foreign to the body that comes in, and it may cause problems for the body and the tissues and the organs. And pathogens are disease-producing organisms, absolutely. All right, now number 4 function. The antibodies / immunoglobulins, they provide short and long-term immunity. What does immunity mean? It means the ability to destroy something that's going to come in again and maybe again and again, right? And so short-term immunity means it's just going to be able to do it for a short period of time, and then you're going to have to generate new antibodies to combat that situation again. But then some antibodies last a long, long time, like a lifetime, right, for you. All right, so number 5 function. Basically, the lymph nodes absorb excess fat-soluble vitamins, which are KADE, remember KADE, and they destroy them, right? So that's a helpful thing. Number 6, the thymus gland makes a hormone called thymosin, okay, thymosin. And thymosin goes to the bone marrow and it tells it to make the beta antibody for life. And so the T antibody that's produced will also get made for life in the bone marrow once the thymus gland goes away. But thymosin is the hormone that will control every bone marrow cavity and tell it to make this protein, basically the beta protein for life, right? So that's your long-term immunity there with that beta. All right, so number 7 function for the system is the lymphocytes reproduce and die in lymph nodes. Lymphocytes can also be made, of course, in the bone marrow with all the other blood cells and plasma as part of blood CT. All right, and then number 8, there are no lymphatic organs / veins, no lymph veins, okay, in the teeth, in bone cartilage, and in your nervous system, the CNS. Wow, and so that's a big one. All right, now, general information or terms associated with the lymphatic immune system. First of all, there are five main groups, again, of antibodies or immunoglobulins. Game D, right up there. They are made in specific locations in the body, and they can also be found in secretions, okay? In secretions like tears and saliva, wax, sweat, and plasma. So that's the first thing. Second thing, what's an antigen and what's the abbreviation? AG, little g. So any foreign substance that enters the body that's not normally found in it, that's an antigen. Now, antibodies are number 3, the ABs, made of proteins and disulfide bonds. Just in case you would know a little chemistry, and the disulfide bonds are going to make an arrangement called heavy and light chains that make up your proteins. And that chemistry, it makes learning about antibodies a little difficult for some people. So anyway, basically it's made out of proteins, right? Antibodies also bond to an antigen to prevent cell entry through the cell membrane pores, or the antibody can actually attach to cell membrane protein receptors to keep the bacteria or the virus or whatever the antigen is from entering through the cell membrane. So that's what your antibodies do, their mode of action. And then the last thing, for every antigen that enters the body will make an antibody against it, right? And then it will recognize that antigen over and over to give you immunity, okay? And so immunity essentially prevents infections, and then it also, the immunity will also help fight against malignant cells or abnormal growth. Now the last thing about the immune system or lymphatic system is that there are 6 specific kinds or types of immunity created, right? And this is on the back of the sheet of the notes. And so the first kind is called genetic immunity. This is the DNA in your cells that you basically inherited, keeps us from coming down with diseases. And why does it? Because you have good DNA, and that DNA turns into great RNA, which RNA makes the enzymes, and the enzymes go to the cell organelles called lysosomes, and the lysosomes will release basically the enzymes to destroy invading antigens. So there's no antibodies involved. You just have supreme genetic immunity. That's what's involved. So it goes from the DNA, the RNA makes enzymes, goes to the lysosomes, and when anything foreign comes into that cell, man, those lysosomes release the enzymes and they destroy the antigens and you do not get sick, right? Now the next 4 sort of are a little confusing sometimes. So it's called acquired passive, up here, acquired passive, or natural immunity, okay? Acquired passive. So how do you get this kind of immunity? It's passed on by your genetics and your antibodies from the thymus and the bone marrow, and the antibodies that are found in mom's milk, right? And so you have really nothing to do with it. It's just been passed on through your genetics, right there. And then we have another form of acquired passive, and so it's called artificial immunity. Now here, you're actually going to make antibodies. The antibodies are going to be made from injections called vaccines. So vaccines are artificial immunity because we have to inject them, right? And so your vaccines that you get as a kid or even as an adult, they're made out of dead or alive viral particles or dead or alive bacteria, right? And they're injected, and then you're going to make antibodies in response to that. So that's acquired passive, a passive way to get that. All right, and then the next two over here, we have acquired active, also known as natural immunity, and we have acquired active, which is called artificial immunity. So let's look at the top one. Number 4, acquired active natural immunity. This is produced, okay, you produce your own antibodies in your bone marrow from memory cells in the fibroblasts. And so you're going to automatically make them because they remember the antibodies that were made there. And so that's a natural response. And then we have artificial immunity here that's acquired active. So vaccine stimulates the production of antibodies and through the memory cells, which are the fibroblasts, right, in your bone marrow. So basically, that's another way you can get immunity. And then the last type of immunity that we have is called humoral immunity. And this is found naturally in your body fluids, okay, and your secretions. So you are going to make these antibodies, and they're going to be found in all your body fluids and secretions, like saliva, tears, sweat, milk, those kind of things. And so the term for that is humoral immunity. So that concludes our lymphatic immune system and the notes that you have for this test. And we will attach a picture of the poster in the lab. You do not have to know all that, but it just shows you the duct work in the lymphatic system a little bit better than that picture on the official respiratory sheet.